Today I'm going to go over how to read your PP&L digital power meter. This is the 6-screen version. That means it has 6 screens that it cycles through that shows you different numbers for. First I'm going to go over briefly what everything is, and then from there I'll go into a little bit more in depth. Your first screen here is going to be the number 1 screen. That's the lifetime kilowatt hour counter. That's kind of like an odometer in a car. It always goes up, it never goes down. Whether you have a backfeed system or not, it still always goes forward. If you're backfeeding, it just stops going forward. The second number 2, is your backfeed counter. If you have some kind of solar generator, this is how much power you're feeding back into the system above what you're using for yourself. This is also like an odometer. It always reads forward, it never reads backwards. The next one is the number 3. This is kind of unique from what I've seen to PP&L meters. It might be not just for PP&L, but I just personally haven't seen anybody using this screen for this value. But this is your peak usage for that day. This resets daily, and it just shows you at the highest point of your power usage during the day at any point. The next screen is going to be your closed open screen. This is going to say whether your system, the internal power switch that's built into your meter is allowing power to go through to your house or not. Next screen is going to say GSS, and that is more of a communications version, software version. It's kind of used for troubleshooting for PP&L. It's not anything that we can really use because it's something that they reflect on from their end. And then the final screen is the test screen. This is where everything lights up. All of your dots, dashes, letters, and everything on the display that's supposed to be working is working, so that you don't have like a 9 looking like a 4. And the only other thing on here to see is the current flow meter. That's the dashes across the bottom, which unless you have some kind of generation system, that should always be running from left to right. That's going to show that power's flowing from PP&L to your system and how fast it's flowing into your system. Okay, so the first number here, this is your power meter. This is your lifetime supply since the meter was installed. Always goes up, never goes down, like an odometer in a car. To get your daily use, say, you would come out at a certain time in the morning, read the number off of here, come back the next day, read the number in the same location, 01, and subtract the difference. That's going to say how much you used over one day. Same thing for a week, same thing for an hour, whatever you're trying to read. This is the number that they use for billing. So this is simply your power meter. Okay, window number 2. This is your lifetime return meter. This also is like an odometer that never resets, always goes up, never goes down, but instead of reading the power going to your building, this is the reading the power that's coming from your building back onto the grid. If you have like a solar or a wind generator, this isn't how much power you've generated. This is how much overage that you've generated and pushed back onto the grid. Now, if you don't have some kind of a generator on your property and you have a reading on this, that could be a problem, believe it or not, because if somehow you're pushing electricity onto the grid and you don't have a transfer switch set up on that, you could actually electrocute somebody in the event of a power outage. That's just not good. You might notice these 2 dashes here moving across the bottom of the display. What these do is these are like your second hand. They tell you which direction the power is flowing and how fast it's flowing. If you're not generating any power on your property, you're only taking power from the grid, you're going to see those dashes move from left to right and then recirculate back to the beginning and just keep flowing like that. Now, if you're in the middle of the day, sun's up, you're pushing a lot of power back onto the grid, you're going to see those dashes move from right to left. That means that you're sending power back onto the grid. Any excess that you're not using on your property, that's what's going there. I have seen cloudy days, not using very much power, not generating very much power. You can actually see these things hold still or bump forward and then bump backwards. That does happen. And that just means, doesn't mean you're not using power. It just means that you're not taking it from the grid, or taking very little from the grid and then giving back very little to the grid. You might be generating just enough power to balance what your usage is in the house, and those dashes will hold still. It's pretty neat. So how do we use this information when applying it to, say, solar? You have a solar generator just got up, you want to see how this all works. Okay, so we're going to go day one. We'll take a meter reading in the morning, and it says, reading number 1 says 40100. And your window number 2 says 100. We're going to keep it nice and simple. You come back the next day, and you do your meter reading. And window number 1 says 40145. Window number 2 says 140. So what that means is, over the 24-hour period, you used 45 kilowatts from PP&L, and you pushed 40 kilowatts back onto the grid. Now, that's not how much you generated. That just means that that's how much extra you put back on. So your bill is only going to be for 5 kilowatts because you took 45 from PP&L and you gave back 40. So you're only going to get billed for 5. Even though you're only getting billed for 5, that's definitely not how much power you've used. I use Palmetto, so I'm going to bring up their app here, and I'll see that let's take the same day. Still artificial numbers, but this one's real. So we had 82 kilowatts of electricity generated that day. But I pushed 40 of that back onto the grid. That means that I used 42 kilowatts of the electricity that I generated from my solar and gave the rest back to the power grid. So if I used 42 kilowatts during the day and I used 45 kilowatts basically at night, that's when I would have been pulling from. So for the 24-hour period, I would have used 87 kilowatts total, but because I pushed it back extra onto the grid during the day, get that credit that adds up, I only ended up getting billed for 5 kilowatts for that day. Window number 3. This is kind of specific to PP&L because different power companies use this window for different readouts for whatever reason. But PP&L specifically uses this for your peak usage over 24 hours. Now this one does reset daily. And this one shows that the highest point of power consumption during the day, at any given point of the day. Generally, a peak meter is used to make sure that you're not pulling too much electricity through a system so that you're not driving it too hard, overloading it. You don't want to overload an electrical system because it's going to possibly cause a fire. Okay, so the way this works is kilowatts is equal to amps times volts divided by 1,000 because it's kilowatts. So basically on a 100 amp system that's running on 240 volts, which is one of the most common you can find, you're going to be looking at 24,000 watts or 24 kilowatts. Now that's what the system's maximum load is rated for. So with using the 80% rule, which means you don't want to load the system more than 80% of the capability as like a safety margin, you should never see a number more than like 19 on that. And if you see a number 19, you might even want to be concerned because it should be a lot lower than that. Another standard size for a house is like 200 amp, 240 volt, single phase, would be 48,000 or 48 kilowatts. So with the 80% rule on that, if you're like 38 or higher, you might want to look into see what's going on because they're Could possibly be a short in your system, or maybe you're just running a lot of tools in the garage and it might be time for you to step up to a bigger system. But regardless, overloading your system creates a potential fire hazard, and I'm pretty sure that's why PP&L uses the peak meter on theirs as their third readout. If you're not sure what size system you're using, you just go to your main breaker panel, most likely in your basement or garage. You're going to look for the largest breaker at the top of the box. That's going to tell you, it's going to say 100, it's going to say 200, it might be higher, it might be lower, but yeah, it's most likely going to be one of those 200 or 200, and that's going to tell you what size system that you have for your house. Okay, so the next window doesn't have a number. It's got to be labeled by either CLS or OPN. Hopefully yours says CLS. What this does is it tells you the condition of the internal power switch of the meter. There's a built-in on-off switch inside the meter. CLS stands for closed. It's an electrical term. It means that the circuit is closed. You have a full loop, basically, which means power is flowing. And it might seem backwards to some people, but it's just the way they work it. So CLS is a good thing. It means that you're receiving power to your property, or if you're generating power back, it's flowing through the meter as it should. If it says OPN, OPN means that the meter itself is getting power on the PP&L side, but the bridge is open, the circuit is open, no power is flowing through the meter. So that's going to indicate that there's either a fault inside the meter for some reason, or PP&L might have cut off your power and not allowing power to go through. And the last screen is a self-test screen. All it does is light up all the little dots and dashes and things that make up the letters and all the letters, and just make sure that everything's working right. So whenever you're looking at the meter, an 8 doesn't look like a 9 or a 6, or just to make sure that everything's working. So if you got something that's out on this screen, you might have a display that's starting to go bad. But that's it. That's the GridStream RF Focus, as it's used by PP&L in central Pennsylvania. Any questions, I guess, drop them below. If I don't have the answers, I'm sure somebody does. Figure it out one way or another. But if you found this useful, give it a like and have a good day.